Hi there. In my last video, I said something that needs a little more clarification. I said that emotion must be expressed in order to be moved through. But, and this is a big but, it's really much more effective if you don't speak from the big uncomfortable emotion while it is present in you. If you have developed the capacity to recognize the big emotion is present in you, to register that you are triggered, which can be developed through the practice of mindfulness, it would be far better to take a pause at this moment and choose not to express from this place. The main reason I say this is because when we're in big emotion, we tend to forget all the tools that we possess for effective communication. We will tend to communicate with false feelings in this case, and this will shut down effective communication. When we use false feelings, it naturally comes across as an attack from the other person's standpoint. As I said in the video on false feelings a few weeks ago, we are essentially telling the other person they are responsible for our discomfort, and their ears will shut down, I guarantee it. And since emotion wants to be seen and validated, we're making the attainment of what we want impossible. We're not communicating in these cases. We are becoming the emotion rather than witnessing to the emotion ourselves and reporting on them. This is how non-constructive yelling matches are triggered. Yelling matches are never constructive. Never. When we're triggered, and we don't realize we are triggered, we are unconscious. Here's the neuroscience to explain it. There's an evolutionary model for the brain called the triune model, which helps explain how this works. The development of the human brain had 3 stages up until now at least. First, there was the brainstem, which is responsible for the freeze response to external stimulus that appear threatening. This part of the brain is shared by all mammals as well as amphibians, and it's sometimes referred to as our reptilian brain. When you notice yourself shutting down or dissociating, this is the part of your brain that is active. In extreme cases, it looks like playing dead, and it's not voluntary, in that it's not a conscious decision. It's a last-ditch effort when the predator is bearing down on the prey. It can be effective, and there's videos you can watch on how it works in the animal world. Then, over time, we humans developed the limbic system, which could be referred to as the seat of our emotions. We share this with all the mammals. And this is where the fight and flight instincts are from. The limbic system has its own memory system called the hippocampus, but it's not a narrative memory system in that it has no words, no story really at all. It just has associations from the past. It just has associations from past experiences, stored for the purpose of getting triggered to either run away or fight when threat is perceived. So at that point in our evolutionary development, we had 3 strategies for survival when faced with threat: fight, flight, and freeze. None of them voluntary. This was extremely helpful when there were lions and tigers and bears bearing down on us. But since we have evolved further and created a society where these sorts of concrete threats are pretty infrequent, it doesn't serve the purpose that it used to. Now that we have shelters with locks on them, it's not often the case that the limbic system activation is really and truly called for the purposes of surviving. But this doesn't mean that we lost this part of the brain. It has stuck around, and often causes more problems than it solves. What I mean is that it gets activated when abstract threats are perceived. Threats like abandonment, for instance. Humans and other primates developed yet another layer to our brains called the cortex. This is where our identity exists in the form of a narrative story of our lives that we basically refer to as our self-concept. The cortex is where our executive functioning comes from. It's where our sense of agency exists. Our conscious intentions. It's where reason and logic exist as well. Now here's the kicker. When we are triggered emotionally, the cortex shuts down. Think of it as a hard drive literally getting unplugged as the limbic system takes over, and we tend to forget all the more improved social tools that we have for getting ourselves out of sticky situations. When I'm triggered, the part of me which I identify as me isn't plugged in unless I have developed the sensitivity to my emotions through the practice of mindfulness to be aware that I am triggered. And the threats these days are usually abstract. They're not real. I'm not about to be torn to shreds, but rather my self-concept as a decent person is, where my safety is because I'm perceiving that I am being abandoned by this other person, even when that's not actually the case. The cortex came about to offer us the tools we need to deal with abstract threats through communicating with each other. You've probably heard about how hostages often tend to befriend their captors. That is a perfect example of how the cortex uses social tools as another strategy for survival. If you and your partner are on the brink of an argument, it only takes one of you to stop the escalation from happening, but you must remember to recognize that you are triggered for this to happen. And the practice of mindfulness, as I've mentioned a couple of times now, is the key to remembering. You register that you are triggered, and instead of saying what you were about to say, you pause. And then you might say something like, "Hey, I recognize that we're both triggered right now, and if we keep talking, I'm probably going to say some things that I'll regret later. I don't want to sweep this issue under the rug. It's important to me, and I see that it's important to you. But why don't we take a little break from talking and take some space and calm down? And then we can return to this when we can both think more clearly." The not sweeping it under the rug part is extremely important, not just because the other person is upset and wants to get their point across, but also because if they have abandonment issues, which most of us do, not including this part will make them even more frightened. There's a lot more to say about this, but I'm trying to keep these videos relatively bite-sized so as not to lose your attention. If we want to have harmonious relationships, we need to know this stuff. So just a reminder to like and subscribe if you're finding these ideas helpful. And I appreciate any comments and feedback you have to give. If you want to read some of my articles, you can find me at Substack, where I exist as natekokernot, at natekokernot, and my website is miraclereadiness.com. Thanks for joining me here today, and I'll see you later.